Bob Sansevere here with Pioneer Press sports editor Mike Bass. And Mike, the Wolves right now, they got back within a game of 500. Kevin Love is just playing wonderfully for him. Great numbers again. But when Ricky Rubio got hurt, and that is it hurt him, and it will continue, I think, to hurt him. They didn't do anything in terms of any sort of a move with a trade, and it could come back and bite him, and it seems to have bitten him. They lost 3 in a row before that win. I don't know why they didn't trade Beasley. They should have unloaded Beasley and gotten something for him, because next year he's not going to be even with them, I don't think, next year. But do you see it do you see any sense in not making a move?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's 2 things that go to. One is when you make a trade like that, it energizes the team. It shows you bring some new talent in there. That does well. Plus the fact that the players themselves can make you better. It sends a bad message when you don't do anything. Yeah, I mean, everybody agreed that they wanted to get rid of Beasley. It was finding that right combination. You can get Jamal Crawford. It seems like a no-brainer in that. Now, with the other complications where there was a 4th team involved, and would they have had to get rid of Tolliver too in it and had to take on Derek Fisher, that seems to be what the Timberwolves, what scared them away from it. I can understand having some hesitation there. For one thing, you're not going to have all that many front court players if you end up getting rid of both Tolliver and Beasley. But boy, it really hurts you. You had a chance to get an outside shooter to put some life back in that locker room. I don't think it's a coincidence that then they lost 3 straight games. That could come back to bite them. And long term, if those are the moves that we're making, yeah, maybe you got to take on Fisher's salary. Didn't seem to stop Houston, which turned around and dumped him. I think you got to make a move like that. It generates interest. I don't think it would have had big implications on the long term. I think that's something that can come back and really, when they look back, that they had a chance and missed it.
Well, I think what ultimately it also says is that there's not enough teams that were that desperate to get Michael Beasley and take him on.
But there were. I mean, certainly they wanted it. Well, at what point? I mean, what are you going to get for it?
Well, they should have been cut out and tried to deal one-on-one with the team if they felt they could have done. But the team that they probably wanted a player from, that's the thing about the NBA. You're always seeing these multiple team deals. They don't. They do have one-on-one, but you see a lot more of the other ones too. Now, this is a one-on-one deal. Peyton Manning going to the Denver Broncos. Frankly, I think it's going to mean wonders for Demarius. Takes his last name. That guy and Eric Decker. Draw a blank on his
last name. That name, Eric Decker.
Yeah, I know good. Decker.
Yeah.
And I remember Demarius' first name. Mike, it's tough to get old.
Yeah, I know. What's your name again? Mike,
yeah. Anyway,
who are we?
It's going to be wonderful for, I think, the receivers, and that's going to give this team a surge. What it doesn't do wonders for is Tim Tebow.
Yes, and I know you addressed, which I'm glad you did, online at TwinCities.com yesterday because as soon as Tebow becomes available, and looks like he's going to become available, every team's going to say, well, should he fit in here? Should we go after him and all of that? Absolutely right. There's no sense for him to go to the Vikings. What he did last year was amazing, and they rode a wave. The Vikings would be making a big mistake to go down that road. They've got a guy that they think they believe in Christian Ponder. You bring in Tebow, and now it's a mess. Besides the fact of the dynamic between the two of them. They were both in Florida. There was kind of a rivalry between the two of them, one in Florida and one at Florida State. You're going to bring him in there at a rebuilding team? It's just a bad situation.
Tebow is about 50 years too. He would have been a terrific tailback in the single wing because he can throw a little and he can run a lot. And that's what the single wing the quarterback in the single wing does nothing. It's the tailback that's the key, and he would have been a pretty good tailback in the single. I don't think any NFL teams are going to the single wing. Now, it's also interesting. A guy who the Twins thought would be having not a Peyton Manning type impact to their team, but would have an impact was Tsuyoshi Nishioka, and now he's in the minors and. And frankly, I don't think they ever want to see him back on the major league team. They're probably going to try to figure out a way to, and he's probably going to want to go back to Japan. So I think they'll work something out where he can leave and go back to Japan, where he was a star there.
What a disaster that turned out to be. I mean, that was their big acquisition last year, and Bill Smith put out the money for it, and they did it, and he just was terrible for them. Who would have thought that was going to happen? And now to be sent down to the minors this early and they have to pay him that much money. I know Terry Ryan was saying yesterday that, it takes a player from Japan a year to get used to it and that the injury slowed down his learning process. Okay, fair enough. but clearly they saw nothing in him that would warrant keeping him up there in the major leagues. That was a flat out bust, disaster. Maybe one day it'll pay off, but when you look at reasons why Bill Smith didn't work out as general manager, maybe that's Exhibit A.
Well, actually, in fairness to him, he can't field, he can't hit. But other than that, he has some, there's some things that he can do for the team, maybe. Also on the Twins, Justin Morneau. Frankly, I think it's, and a lot of people probably are pleased to see that he's not dealing with concussion issues. What he's dealing with is the inability to get a hit. He's 3 for 30 in spring training, and there's a lot of rust that has to be shaken off. And you have to wonder, he's been talking about it, and he's trying to be optimistic, but in some way, I guess only he can tell us, and maybe he would not be, maybe he's in denial about it, if the concussions are, have essentially impacted him beyond just shaking the rust off.
Well, it's the concussions, it's the wrist, it's everything with him, and the rust. You don't know. You can't have another season even before he had the other concussion like he did. You're paying a lot of money, and it's not his fault that he's making that money. He earned that money to be able to do it. But when you're investing that kind of money in a guy who's one of your franchise players, that's a bad sign right now. Now, on the good side for them, he keeps saying that he's feeling well, that it looks good, and maybe he's just he's shaking out the rust and doing it. He's trying to get a lot of at-bats, and maybe he's ready for the season. Because these statistics mean absolutely nothing when the season starts.
But name one player for me who has ever said, Marvel, I'm done. I can't do a thing. They're not going to be, no player is going to admit that they've got nothing going and it's not going to work out unless it's their last day as a professional athlete. Maybe you'll get some raw emotion out of it, but no player is going to admit things are horrific and they're just not doing it.
But they could say, I'm still struggling, I'm not 100% yet, I'm working out the problems on there. Players say that all the time. I'm not 100% yet. How many times did you hear Joe Mauer say, I'm not quite 100% last year?
Well, didn't he have a larynx injury where he had trouble talking to? I think that took him out for a few games, too. Yes, here we go. Well, you know what? Joe Mauer is healthy, and he's wealthy, and we'll leave it at that. We'll see how he does this year. I think a lot of people are hoping that he bounces back, and them to, I don't even think you can say for them to have a chance to compete for a division title, he needs to be healthy more. No, for them to not be an embarrassment, he needs to be healthy.
Well, you get those two. That's the thing is, you look at this team, and those two guys, if they're healthy, that's a huge if. What they can do production-wise are incredible. Suddenly the Twins become a much different team on there. Of course, then there's the whole pitching argument, which could be for another podcast. But
yes, and because we don't have a lot of time left, and that's why I'm going to mention this. Gopher's still in the NIT. Woohoo!
But you know what?
Oh, please.
It's
Go ahead.
Yes.
No.
It's the fight for the 69th best team in the country or whatever it is at this point. But what it does do, they are seeming to find an identity. They seem to be playing better without Ralph Sampson.
Listen to what you just said.
And if you do go to New York and you get some experience on there and you start to play, it can help you for next year. You don't agree with that?
Well, yes, you get experience.
Didn't it do that with Clem Haskins and his team?
You get experience walking around Times Square and having somebody try to sell you a watch. That's
a Nolex?
Yeah, get a Nolex.
Yeah, great.
Or a Bolex or one of those.
They have enough per diem to buy a Nolex.
If they feel they get some benefit out of it, well, then good for them. And you know what? And good for the rest of you, because this will bring the end to this podcast.
Yes, it will.
And we'll look forward in the days, weeks, months, eons ahead to talk even more about these terrific topics.